Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. The Government Operations Committee for Monday, March the 18th will come to order. Madam Clerk, please call roll.
Representatives Bolso, Carr, Chisholm, Clemens, Crawford, Eldridge, Faison, Hakeem, Helton Haynes, Himmer, Johnson, Jones, Kiesling, Kumar, Lafferty, Littleton, Martin,
Present.
McCalman, Rudder, Vice Chairman Reedy, Chairman Reagan. Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Do we have any personal announcements before we get started? Seeing none. For the members that are attending in the audience, if you have signs, please remember you cannot block the view of the people behind you. So if you hold them up, hold them so you're not blocking anyone else's view. As a reminder, the Government Operations Committee hears bills as a recommendation for positive, negative, or neutral. And the bills that come to us from other committees are voted on such. If the bill is in this committee of primary jurisdiction, then we act as any other committee. With that said, are there any questions on that? Again, as a reminder, this bill or the bills that are before us where we are not primary jurisdiction are before us because they involve creating an agency, terminating an agency, or have rulemaking authority. I'll ask the members to concentrate your questions on those things that are surrounding rules. With that, if there's no other questions or comments, we're going to begin our calendar. We're on item number 1, House Bill 1183. Leader Lambeth, you recognize, sir?
Make a motion for positive recommendation.
We have a motion and a second on that. We have, who's going to be the first presenter?
Right here.
Okay, Chairman White, you're recognized on House Bill 1183. Please begin.
Thank you, Chairman Reagan and committee. House Bill 1183, also known as the Education Freedom Scholarship Bill, proposed by our administration. House leadership and education chairs, which you see before you, we've been working on this since January, have designed this legislation that addresses many of the benefits to not only to our public schools while keeping the intent of the legislation as proposed by the administration. Because the policies requiring rulemaking authority by various departments, we are before this committee to discuss those sections dealing with rulemaking authority. Should this legislation pass through the House and Senate, this legislation will be back before this committee under your authority. We also understand the actions of this committee are not a rubber stamp of the legislation, but this committee does have direct oversight of the rulemaking and the legislation. And I have with me other members of the Education Committee. We're ready to answer questions from the committee. Chairman Reagan, thank you.
All right, thank you, Chairman White. Before we get to that, confirm that we have an amendment traveling with it, number 15320. Is that correct, sir?
That is correct.
And that amendment rewrote the bill, correct?
That is correct.
All right. Well, Chairman Sapicki, I think you're first up. Is that right?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Would you like us to give details on the bill or just answer questions from your committee on rules?
Let's start with the questions, since Chairman White has given a summary already. Members of the committee, you have heard a summary of the bill before us. We have a list of questions. Representative Johnson of Knox, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, what I'd like to talk about rules when it's related to 3 things: curriculum, special ed, and assessment. What I'm seeing here is a lack of academic accountability. We're talking about testing in public schools over the last 10 or 12 years. This body has been very intentional about the testing they give for kids and saying that this testing is critical in order for our kids to do well. And that's standards-based testing that is criterion reference based on testing the standards that our state curriculum teaches. However, private schools do norm reference tests that don't measure any attainment of standards, but instead measure from one child to another. So my question to you is, seeing that there is not the same type of testing and that these schools can teach any curriculum they choose, how are we going to know they're being accountable with our public tax dollars?
Okay, who would like to field that question?
President Haston, would you like that?
Chairman Haston, you're recognized.
Thank you.
Excuse me, just a second here. For the purposes of our video recording, please give us your name and position, sir.
Representative Kirk Haston, District 72. Yeah, to get to your point on the reason why the difference in the testing that we've been federally, the difference between what we do mandated from the state of Tennessee and what's federally required. The state of Tennessee, currently we require 28 standardized tests. We're only federally mandated to require 17 tests. So it's not really reducing accountability by reducing these tests. It's really just making the accountability more efficient. And one of the things that we've seen, there's the NAEP scores that we've had since 2007 when we really put this rigorous testing structure in and some of the rigorous standards. Our NAEP rank from 2007 to now has still meandered in the 33 to 42 range. The results of the testing scores have been relatively the same. The one jump that we did have in rank was this past year when we went up to 22nd, but our test scores actually went down in NAEP. And so the process that we went back to that when we changed from 2007 to a more rigorous standards did move the needle some initially. But what we've seen is we've really gotten stagnant. And we think that, with the Education Freedom Act, what it does is by reducing the amount of tests that we're requiring, we're going to increase instruction time close to 277 hours. And trusting our teachers and trusting our students to really have time to improve upon, the curriculum that's before them, but also giving them a chance to really shine and produce well on the tests that are still there for accountability that matter the most.
That's nice, but that's not my question.
Excuse me, please wait to be recognized. You're
Well, I
recognized.
stuck my hand up a second ago. Thought you saw it. That's not what I asked. What I'm asking is how come these private schools are going to be required to do none of those things that we have been requiring for so long and told, quite frankly, some of us told folks we were testing too much. We knew that. But the myth of the failing schools requires some big fake numbers on tests. And so now that we have data from the current voucher situation, where of the voucher students are performing less well than their private school peers with vouchers. And I think that testing is crucial for folks to know about. If we are saying the reason we're spending these state dollars to go to private schools is because we want them to get better grades and do better on the test, and that's not what is happening. Why do the private schools, why are they required or not required to take these criterions reference tests, but instead norm reference tests, which the state does not require for ours? I'm talking about what we're requiring of private schools. There's no accountability for them when it comes to testing.
You're recognized, Representative Haston.
Yeah, and I think Chairman Slater might have a little bit more insight on the private school requirements and some of the third-party requirements that'll be done on some of those testing. I will say this, that some of the test results so far, I mean, we are in the early stages. I think that, one of the things you can look at, though, is I know that some of the testing has come in to where it wasn't up to where some of the comparative students have been, but you got to look at where those students first started. And so I still think the jury's still out on that aspect of it. I do think that we've had, which I don't think it's a data point that can be brushed aside too quickly, is of those that have been participating so far, there's been overwhelming support and 99%, I think, survey approval of the parents. And I think that that's something that needs to be taken into account as well.
Chairman Slater, you're recognized.
Thank you. William Slater, State Representative for District Number 35. I think your question had to do with norm reference tests related that are required in private schools, and then criterion reference tests in public schools. I think it would be incorrect to assume that just because a test is a norm reference test, that the questions themselves do not contain content. Norm reference tests are filled with content questions in language arts and mathematics and social studies and science as well. So there are content questions. Perhaps the question was related to alignment with state standards. And though norm reference tests may not be perfectly aligned with state standards, the fact that they are offered as valid and reliable tests. For example, many private schools use the Iowa Test of Basic Skills. Some use the Stanford test. Those tests are used across the country, and they test a student's knowledge. They test achievement, and they test growth as well. So it's certainly possible for the state of Tennessee, whether it be through the Department of Education or if there's rulemaking with the state board, to analyze the information that's coming into the state on whether or not students that accept these scholarships and are attending private schools, whether or not they are achieving growth and whether they are just straight out achievement as well. Norm reference tests do that.
Representative Johnson, let me go down the list here. I'll come back to you.
I think
Next
I
on my
need
list, next on my list is Representative Hakeem.
to make this statement.
Representative Johnson, there are a lot of people on the list. Well, I'll come back to you. Representative Hakeem, you're recognized.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have three questions if I could get them out. The first deals with public dollars being used outside of public schools. And I guess somewhat following up on the question by Representative Johnson, we're talking about religious schools, as I understand it, home schools, private schools, receiving public dollars. And am I hearing from you all that there is not a standard test that could be used in all of those, that we're going to have different norms for each group? That's my first question.
And Chairman White, you're recognized.
I'll address the one part of your question, and then I refer to my colleagues. Homeschoolers are not in this particular bill. We had originally written them out, and then we even did an amendment 15003, even making it further clear that they are not. So homeschoolers are not. And now, if another colleague wants to address other parts of your question.
Representative Hakeem.
Chairman Hazen.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you, Chairman Reagan. Representative Hakeem, on the question or the point that you had about the public dollars going to private schools, it's a very fair point. It's a great point. It's probably one I've made in the past as well. I'd say that one thing I will say that I think counterbalances that, and I don't think either one of these statements I'm going to make outweighs the other, but I think it's a fair statement either way, is to say it's also private citizens' tax dollars being decided by a private citizen on how to educate their child. I'm not saying that answers or that point of view is better than the one that you're stating, but I just think it's one that we have to consider on both sides.
Follow up, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I still have a problem with public dollars going into private schools. My second question is that, could one of you provide me with an example nationwide where the voucher concept has worked and not busted the bank, so to speak?
I'm sorry. Representative Sapicki.
So if I understand your question correctly, is we've all heard of the horror stories of states that have started down this pathway, and the budget balloons up to $1 billion, and there's funding issues in those states. Is that your question you're asking?
In essence, yes, sir.
And
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One of the things we've done in this legislation, if you look at Section 1, is we've looked at all those states that have made mistakes in this question that you've asked directly. You look at the state of Arizona that's now funding almost $1 billion in year 2, $1 billion. We've put parameters in here that keeps the General Assembly in control of the expansion of this program. We started out in section 1 with 20,000 scholarships. We put income qualifiers in there to make sure that our most disadvantaged students across the state of Tennessee have the first opportunity to take advantage of the scholarship. We put parameters in there that say that an institution has to be in existence for 3 years and get their accreditation, unlike other states that have allowed these micro schools to pop up and just drain all this money right away. We've also put parameters with the 20,000 that enable for that program to be expanded. The usage has to hit within 10% of the 20,000, and then therefore it could only expand at 20% per year, still subject to this funding body wanting to meet those needs. So I think we've looked at other states that have had pitfalls in this and addressed those in section 1 of the bill to make sure that we are allowing students that are in bad educational situations to try to find a better avenue with also protecting the taxpayers' money to massive expansion.
Representative McQueen, please make this your last one. I'll come back to you if you have others.
Thank you, sir. To your response, I guess I'm questioning how, in my view, educators were limited in their input into this. There's some professionals that we've used that, you know, we think are better informed than our educators. I do have a problem with that. Now, my question is that, can you see, our panel, can you see down the road where education, I'm going to use a term, becomes privatized and private equity firms taking over education, not only the state of Tennessee, but nationwide. And that gap that we see now may be exacerbated in regards to the learning within our system.
You're recognized. Chairman White, is that yours?
And then I defer to Chairman Sapicki. To answer your question, no. I think that what we're doing, and it's always the will of the General Assembly, we have 2-year terms and everything as we continue to look at this as we move down the road, but I would definitely say no at this point.
Thank you. Representative Jones, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Article 11, Section 12 of the Tennessee Constitution declares that the state of Tennessee recognizes the inherent value of education and encourages its support. The Tennessee Constitution mandates that the General Assembly provide for the maintenance, support, and eligibility standards of a system of free public schools. We have the right to public education in our state constitution. My concern with this is multiple concerns. We know this is a scam, but my concerns are about how this is going to be applied. My first question is, what are we going to do about the number of children who leave these voucher programs and come back to the public schools? How will we ensure that the funding gets restored to the public schools when we see some of these students return back to the public schools because the private schools are not living up to the standards and the methodologies that we've given them?
Representative Spicki, you're recognized.
Thank you for the question. And just to clarify, well, I think I got your question. And if I don't, just let me know. When these scholarships are awarded, they're not awarded at one time. They're awarded like we do for our public schools, is they're funded throughout the year. We use attendance numbers in our public schools to maintain where that student is. Same thing with this bill. That's where the rule promulgation will come in, is identifying those procedures on how we're going to use those identifying markers in these private schools now, so that when we have confidence that in the 4th month in October, when we take those attendance numbers, we release another portion of the scholarship to that entity. Conversely is when that student would transfer back, that public school would notify the state of Tennessee through attendance, and then we would stop sending the next payment to that private school. Now the next payment for that education through TISA would now be enacted with that public school to make sure that it is seamless going from one to the other.
Follow up, sir.
Do we have numbers? I know we've tested out this type of program in our county here in Davidson and Shelby County. Do we have the numbers of the number of students who have returned back to traditional public schools from vouchers and private schools?
You recognize, sir?
Just from eavesdropping behind me, Mr. Chairman, I don't believe they have those numbers of going back, to answer your question.
I think that's my concern is that we don't.
Just a minute, Representative Jones, please be recognized first. You're recognized for this. Make this your last follow-up, and I'll come back to you if you have other questions. Go ahead.
I mean, that's my concern. The Department of Education, we have our commissioner here. No one has this data, so there's no way to validate that public schools are getting the money that they deserve. So here's my final question. I've heard something very concerning to me, and I'm going to try and have a two-part question since this is my last question. I don't know if we'll call the question before we get back to staff's follow-up questions. I've heard that there's an intention to deny undocumented students access to these programs. The Supreme Court case of Plyer v. Doe struck down a Texas statute in which they are prohibiting undocumented students from accessing public education because the Supreme Court found that that is a violation of the 14th Amendment. So my question is, are we setting up an unconstitutional bill from the get-go where your intention is to deny undocumented students access to vouchers when every student in Tennessee has a right to a public education regardless of their immigration status? Is it your intention, Representative Sapicki, under the intention of this law to deny undocumented students? And how do you justify that under standing Supreme Court precedent that is unconstitutional?
You're recognized, Chairman Sapicki.
Thank you. By the way, Scott Sapicki, District 64, Murray County. So you are 100% correct on public education, and as far as I know, in this bill, there is nothing that is pulling money away from the public schools in regards to allowing a student to show up and be educated in our public school system. It's status quo, and that Supreme Court ruling applies to the policy we have in place at the state level to make sure that any child that shows up for public education will be treated fairly across the board. This is a public benefit, and under the public benefit section is we have the ability to enact limiting factors on who can receive a public benefit. One of the nuances of the bill is because this is a public benefit, we can restrict this to U.S. citizens. And so in the language in the bill, and that's where, how are you going to do that? Well, that's where rule promulgation will come in with the department on what they're going to require from these people, from these students who want to take advantage of the scholarship, what documentation they're going to have to provide to show for this benefit that they are a U.S. citizen.
Chairman White, did you wish to be recognized?
I was just going to address one of the questions is that the ESA, which was tied up in court for a number of years, we really only have 1 year last year where the students went through the ESA, so we would not have data yet on returning students.
Yes, Representative Speaker, go ahead.
And I was just speaking with the Department of Education to answer Representative Jones's question. They're checking to see if they collect that information, but under rule promulgation, that might be something with intent that we do monitor when the kids come back to put that in rule promulgation, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Next on my list is Representative Clemens. You're recognized, sir. Leader Clemens. Or, pardon me, Chairman Clemens.
I'll take whatever you got, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. I was looking through this 37-page amendment, I think, that makes the bill, and I couldn't find, but maybe you can mistake me if I'm wrong, and anybody can answer this if you want. Are there any rules or rulemaking processes outlined in here that are going to outline how our state will reimburse our LEAs and our local public schools for the money that you're trying to steal from them?
Sir, you will amend your language appropriately. Nothing is being stolen.
That's a rulemaking question, Mr. Chairman.
No, it's not.
Yeah,
You're
it
not
is.
stealing it.
That's
Do you
exactly
wish to
what we're
am- do
doing.
you
That's
wish
a
to amend your
rulemaking
second-
question.
Do you wish to amend your question, sir?
Are there any rules or rulemaking processes outlined in here that are going to replace the money that this bill will steal from my kids' public schools?
That, Chairman Clemens, do you wish to amend your question?
I asked a question that is within the jurisdiction of this body and this committee.
Sir, your
If you
choice
can't
of,
answer it, you
your
can't
choice,
answer it.
choice of words is inappropriate.
It's a yes or no question, Mr. Chairman.
Then the answer is inappropriate, sir.
That's not an answer.
Next on my list is Representative Hemmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Looking at the amendment, I've been a little bit worried about the lack of rules and how it could affect the fiscal note of this, and particularly looking at how other states have done this, and the fact that their costs have exploded essentially. Just earlier this year, saw Arizona governor put forth a statement out calling it unsustainable. It's blew $1 billion budget hole for them. Looked at I was curious. I looked at other states and how they started the fiscal funding for it, and what it occurs now doesn't really look good. So Wisconsin, 120% over budgeted cost. Louisiana, 153% over budgeted cost. Ohio, 414% over budgeted cost. Florida, 519, Indiana, 810, Georgia, 891%, and Arizona, above all, 1,346 above budgeted costs. So my question for whoever would like to take it is, how can we ensure these rules that we'll make over this bill will not blow a hole in our budget with this entitlement program that we're looking to pass here?
Chairman Spicky.
Thank you. Great question. So you mentioned states that we have looked at as having a voucher policy or a scholarship policy in place that did not have the ability for their General Assembly through law or through rulemaking to put a cap on the amount of people that could take advantage of it, thus, like you said very accurately, blowing up those budgets. I think on the other representative's question that we asked was, how do we assure that this is not going to break the bank in Tennessee? In the language that we have, we put a 20,000 cap in it for year one. And then going forward after that, if usage hits within 10% of the 20,000, the only expansion possible is 20% in the bill, in the law, if passed. Still subject to the funding of the General Assembly. It could go up 20%. And the General Assembly say, you know what, we're not going to expand it, and we're going to sit tight right where we are. That is the nuances that we've looked at through, like the representative said, looking at other states and the shortcomings that they've had in their legislation. We've addressed that into Tennessee to where now we have control over it, of its growth, directly here in the General Assembly of what we want to expand it. Also put in there that it can only expand 20% each year if the General Assembly so wishes.
Chairman Haston, you recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just to build on that, going with some of the funding discussion, Davidson County, for instance, would, in the House version, would get $20 million according to this bill. I did have one public school organization reach out to me at some point, and they said, hey, about 100% of our members love 80% of your bill. 20% they're not thrilled with, and that being the voucher aspect of it, or the scholarship aspect of it. And so if you play that out, 80% of this bill is for public education. 65% of the funding in the bill is for public education. Okay, so let's play that math out even further. The 20% that a lot of you might not like is dealing with 2% of the students, 20,000 students max. We have 900,000 students in Tennessee. So the 20% that you don't like is impacting just that small percentage of students. Then you have the other 880,000 students that are benefiting from the other 80% of the bill and the 65% of the funding.
Follow up, sir.
Yes, thank you. Switch gears around, question around testing. I was trying to get some clarification around this. So currently, Davidson, Shelby, Hamilton appears grandfathered in for their current ESA program. But if this program were to pass, can you talk through if they'll have different testing requirements than the other ESA populations?
Chairman Slater.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So are you referring to testing for students that stay in public schools?
Clarification, sir.
No, just looking at the current language, it was just unclear. So the current requirements for ESA students today in those three counties, Davidson, Shelby, and Hamilton, could you have potential for a situation where they are currently, testing TCAP, whatever the Board of Education creates for rulemaking, but we could have a different set of criteria for the other ESA populations that could go forward from the legislation passage.
Chairman Slater?
So the testing for those who are currently in the ESA program would stay the same in those counties.
Follow up, sir.
So what about the new counties, the additional?
So is,
You're
Mr.
recognized.
Chairman, so is the bill states, students who choose a private school, they would be required to take a nationally norm reference test, as we spoke about earlier.
Sir, let me come back to you. Next on my list is Chairman Lafferty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to back up for a second to the testing situation. Got touched on earlier. It's the big impetus for doing this in the first place is we've got too many kids in too many situations where the public schools aren't keeping them up to standard that we expect as a state. With that being the case, regardless of how many tests we give these kids, shouldn't we at least give the parents the opportunity to put their kids in a better situation regardless of the number of tests?
Chairman White?
You're asking me that question. My question would be, yes, that is the whole point of the administration's bill, to give parental choice where choice is needed. It's not always needed, but to have there, I can give you example after example from my county community where it does work. But to answer your question from my perspective, yes.
Follow up, sir.
Thank you for that. And I'm going to change gear here just for a second. I heard the term private equity brought up. Private equity, a lot of times, even with people that are regular investors in stocks and bonds, private equity can sound like a scare word, which it's probably being used in this case as such. Even if a private equity firm were to be in charge of some type of school option that came to light here in the state of Tennessee, if they don't meet the criteria that we're looking for, and we decide that we don't want to do business with them, then they're not an issue at all. Is that correct?
Chairman speaking.
That's one of the parameters that we put into the bill, Chairman Lafferty, is in other states where potentially this issue has come about, is the quick buck coming into a state that has this program. There's no parameters of having to have any type of educational outcomes of your students. In the bill, in the House bill that we have right here before you, we have required that unable to even take advantage of this program and use it to help students, you have to be in existence in the state of Tennessee for 3 years and receive your accreditation. So you're going to have a track record with the State Board of Education of showing your ability to meet the academic standards and rigors that we have set forth in the state of Tennessee for some private schools, and therefore get the accreditation. Therefore, now you're going to have to invest in the state of Tennessee for 3 years, take on students, show academic success, take that success to the State Board of Education and convince them to give you accreditation.
Last follow up, sir.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm good for now. Thank you.
Next on my list, Representative Chisholm.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I got a statement which I'm gonna follow up with a question. So it from what I've read, it costs a little bit over $11,000 to send a kid to private schools. So which there be more than a $4,000 difference between what a student gets for the voucher and what's left to be paid. So I got a concern that that would take out a lot of our low income students. So my question is, will the dollar amount of the vouchers be standard for every student?
Representative, Chairman Speaker, you're recognized.
Yes, thank you. That's another great question. So the funding, the scholarship dollars are tied to the base amount in TISA. I think it's actually $7,075, something like that. In private schools, there are families at home of low-income families. Let's say, like you said, the tuition's $11,000. They can't swing $11,000, so they're trapped. Wherever their address is, wherever their zip code is, whatever that school performance is, those kids are trapped. The auspice behind the $7,075 is to start to bridge that gap. But remember, private schools give scholarships all the time for kids based off of need, up to 50% of what the tuition is. So let's say we use your $11,000 example. $7,000 is given by the state for this student to try to apply to a private school. That leaves $4,000 left over. Based off of economic need, that private school could award another $2,000 scholarship to that student, now taking the cost of private school from $11,000 down to $2,000. That's going to create the opportunity for these low-income families to figure out a way, hey, can we afford that $2,000 to get our child in a better situation? So there's a policy already in place where scholarships and at the state level that this bill would do, plus the scholarships at the private level that we believe will open up and transform the opportunity for those kids.
You recognize for follow-up?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So what I'm gathering is this is more of a choice for the school then, because if a school only has a certain amount of seats and you can only pick a certain amount of students, they're going to pick the high performing students who can afford to be there. And I'm just afraid this would block out a lot of students that would probably want to go. So I guess my follow-up question would be, will the source of funding come from the TISA allocations that we have allocated to districts?
Chairman Spicki?
The current TISA funding formula that we have right now would not be affected with a student that leaves. It would not be affected. This is outside of that. That's why we can have it as a benefit that the General Assembly will fund outside of normal public education.
Last follow-up, sir.
So would that student lose that base funding?
You recognize, sir?
If a student leaves the public school and go to the private school,
Correct.
the base funding amount is $7,075 in public school. It'd be $7,075 for that private school option.
Okay, we're
Thank you,
back.
Mr. Chairman.
We're back on the list here to Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I'm sorry, excuse me. I missed one. Let me come back to you.
No worries.
Chairman Littleton, you recognized?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can any of you explain to me what would be in this bill for public schools?
You're, Chairman White, you recognized?
I'll start out, like Chairman Sapicki and others said, 85% of this bill is for public schools. One thing, when we started drafting this back in January, we wanted to make sure we are listening. We listened to all the stakeholders in public education, and they gave us their ideas. And so we're getting to put together things such as we'll go over, which is actually part of the bill. But we just said there's over $2 to $1 are in this bill for public schools, 140 million in for the scholarships, and over 250 million additional funds would go into our public schools through healthcare, increasing from 45% to the 60%. Our sparse and small populated districts, the $75 per student for facilities and maintenance. Would anyone else like to jump in at this point?
Chairman Spicki, you recognized?
And thank you. And Mr. Chairman, each one of the members up here has different expertise in certain sections, and so we can give you the detail that you're requesting. First of all, under the TISA provisions in the bill, we're going to increase the weight for a student in a small district from 5%, which is $350, to 8%, which is $560. We're adding a new category for districts between 1,001 students and 1,700 students by adding a 2% weight for those additional students. We're going to increase the weight for students in a sparse district from 5%, which is $350, to 6%, which is $420. And then also in TISA, we're going to add a $75 per student infrastructure fee that will increase local revenues to districts of approximately $72.9 million to be used for those districts for school maintenance and school projects to make their classrooms better and more efficient. We have standardized testing. Mr. Chairman, if you could go to Chairman Haston.
Chairman Haston, you recognized?
Thank you. And we did mention a little bit about the testing earlier, quite a bit about it, but I did want to mention one other key part that's in the bill is the current state insurance match rate is 45% that the state gives to help out pay for teachers' insurance. This bill takes that from 45% to 60%. And why that's important is your rural districts are really having a lot of issues with teachers getting poached. And what happens is our rural districts can't compete with some of the benefits that are being offered by neighboring counties who have more income tax or sales tax coming in, I should say, that they're able to do a higher local match to help pay for the insurance. So state employees, such as we're at 80-20. So we have a lot of CTE teachers. I have one in my district that left this year that left because we have 45-55 in my county because we're a distressed county and we don't have a lot of local money that goes into insurance. So it's 45-55. We have CTE teachers that leave to go across the street to TCATs so they can get the 80-20. That's happening across the state. You also have that happening with our teachers as well. And at some point you get to the point where the rural areas, they can't really poach or pull any other teachers from anywhere else. And so the way that this works, and then I'll let someone else join in on this. But if a district is at 45-55 on that insurance split, then that 15% that's coming into this bill, that goes directly to your teachers. Okay, if they're and most of the insurance costs for teachers is somewhere in the neighborhood of $15,000 to $20,000. So you're looking at a savings of somewhere in the neighborhood of $1,000 to $2,000 a year for that teacher that's on that 45-55. Now you go to some counties, a lot of counties do get to 80-20, but it's because of that 35% local share that's being put in, all right, that's allocated to education already. So that 35% now goes to 20%. That's a massive savings in education funds for that district that can be then sent in any other way that that district would like to see fit in that in education. In our smaller districts, this is is tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars. In some of our bigger districts, it can be $1 million difference. So just wanted to make sure we added that in for one of the insurance pieces in there.
Chairman Slater.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And most of the comments from my colleagues on this question have been around money, and that's certainly important. But let me share with you some things that we heard from educators as we talk with districts for the past several months, talked with some of your district directors as well. What are some things that we can do to add more time and more efficiency and give school districts more flexibility? And so let me share with you some things that don't cost any money, but will be appreciated by our educators around the state. In sections 25 and 26, you'll see that we address teacher evaluations and especially the frequency of teacher evaluations. If this bill passes, then those teachers that are scoring above expectations will only be evaluated every 3 years. They'll continue with the same amount of professional development, but their evaluation will be on a longer cycle. What that does is not only frees up time for that teacher, but also for the administration to work with the teachers that don't score at that level. If a teacher scores above expectations, then they're evaluated every 2 years. And if they're at expectations, then they're evaluated every 1 year. So this gives more time for administrators to work with teachers that need that extra help. Another thing that we heard from districts, and I actually heard this from both of the districts that I represent, Sumner and Trousdale County, is some flexibility as it relates to RTI and high impact, low ratio tutoring. Right now, as a state, we're requiring, if a student needs intervention, we're requiring RTI and we're requiring tutoring as well. And not only my district, but other districts have said, well, it would be better for us if we could choose which is more effective for our particular district. Could we choose RTI or the tutoring option? And so that's in this bill as well. Another thing that we've heard from the districts as well has to do with grade retention and promotion. This will give the opportunity for districts that are doing very well the opportunity to make decisions right at home as it relates to retention and promotion. And then I'll mention a fourth thing, which you see in section number 29, is that this would increase from 5 years to 8 years the time that when a teacher needs to be recertified. Once again, just cutting down on that paperwork, both for administrators and for the teachers themselves.
Chair Little, do you have a follow-up, sir? All right. Chairman Spicky, you recognized.
And thank you. And that's just the tip of the iceberg, members. We also put in there a lot of our concerns with fourth grade and fourth grade retention. We have come to a conclusion that we're going to change the fourth grade retention part of it. And what we're going to say is a student that scores below or approaching on the TCAP test in fourth grade will be allowed to take a multiple choice retake right away. And if they score below and approaching again, then all they're going to be required to do is go to summer school and show up 90% of the time and put the work in. And then in the fifth grade year, we're going to assign them a tutor to make sure that they get those interventions. We've talked to teachers, we've talked to districts. They believe that the summer school and the tutoring interventions are doing wonders. If you look at our third grade numbers that we have for literacy that have now hit 40%, the best they've probably been in over a decade. We also put in there, we're giving flexibilities to the local districts. They can choose the 180-day calendar day or the 6.5 hours equivalent in hours. It gives them more flexibility of maybe going to a 4-day week or having time when they're going to have a 4-day week to be able to do in-service for teachers on a Friday. On their district improvement plans, currently they're having to be sent in every year. We thought it made more sense to make it every 3 years to be able to show that those improvement plans are working and getting the results that they want. Another big problem we've had in our districts is chronic absenteeism. Chronic absenteeism is defined as any student for any reason that misses 18 days of school or more. They're chronically absent, and our districts are getting dinged by that. We've talked this over in committee, and we thought that we had a better idea of saying, okay, we understand that those kids are missing school, but let's grade our districts on their intervention plans and their policies with their parents on how they're engaging the parents to try to mitigate these absentees and getting them lower. We've also looked at transfers into the district. Districts complain to us that, hey, I get a kid that transfers in or maybe comes back from the scholarship program after December 31st. They're going to take the TCAP test and I'm going to get dinged by that. Well, that's not fair. So in the language in the bill, if they come back after December 31st or they transfer in after December 31st, those districts are not going to be held accountable for those grades of those students. We also put prevention in there to stop this from being an athletic recruiting tool. We put the TSSAA transfer rules in there to make sure that those are going to apply. And then the biggest thing that we've debated since I've been in the General Assembly is the Achievement School District. In this bill, the Achievement School District will go away in 2026 and no longer exist. Those are some of the things, and someone else may have something else. I know Chairman Hastings can talk more on the testing aspect of it and how we're shifting on that.
Let me call a halt to that right there, please. Members, I have one other member on the list who has not spoken yet. I'm going to recognize that member. Then we're going to take public comments and come back to those members that I cut off earlier for your comments. So Chairman Kumar, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As it is most of the time and all the time, this discussion goes to dollars and money, taking money out of public schools and where's the money going, whose pocket is it going in. I thought the basic idea is education. I don't care where the money comes from. I don't care where the money goes. Teach and educate our children so they can read and learn better. That is the basic premise that we should stay with. A very smart educator, I asked him, I said, they asked me, why are you giving public dollars to private enterprises or private schools? The answer was those public dollars are tax dollars that come from the public, and they come from the pockets of tax-paying citizens. And by giving it to private school or public school, we are educating the children of those tax-paying citizens. It's not, ideologically, we can get involved into terminology, but it's, again, money is coming from the citizens, and it is going to educate the children of those citizens. Choice to leave a school is complicated, but the only reason a parent would do that would be that they see their child not performing well, or they see the opportunity for, yes, which they perceive to be a better education. A lot of things have to fall in place. A parent has to be interested. They have to have transportation. They have to have commitment to transport their child or other things necessary. Let's face it, my friends, failing schools do exist. It is morally wrong of us to condemn a child, that's too strong a word, forgive me, but lock a child into going to that school. That's the way it is because we are not going to take public dollars out. Really, we are locking a child in and taking the choice away. Again, as I said, failing schools do exist.
Parliamentary inquiry.
Let's
Parliamentary
give those
inquiry.
people a choice.
Sorry,
I had a parliamentary inquiry.
you're recognized, sir.
I didn't know we were allowed to just go on rants and monologues. Was there a question? If so, are we able to respond in commentary? I thought this is to get asked questions because I also had a whole bunch of commentary to give, but that's not usually allowed on this committee to just make.
Your point is accepted.
Thank
Dr. Kumar, do you have a question?
I don't have a question, but okay, I can frame it as a question. Thank you. My question would be that considering the fact that if vouchers or any other form of freedom scholarship is approved, and we know that when that happens, a small percent, maybe 3 to 5% of our students will leave public school to go into private education. That means 95% of our children are still going to be in public education. What are we going to do to improve the education of those children also, because they are going to be the vast majority of our children and they are going to be in public education? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman White, you want to field that one, sir?
I can start, then defer to Chairman Speaker. Well, I think you can see from many of the things that we've given you in this bill, when we drafted this, we're talking about, we have a $9 billion budget in the Tennessee for K through 12. We're adding in another $250 million in this bill for our public schools, all the while we're addressing just 2% of the student population, right at 20,000 at a cost of $140 million, a very minute amount of our $9 billion. And so what we have done, and by keeping the choice part in this bill for parents and students that you just spoke of, but we are now working on things to help listen to our public schools and help them with the things. On the education committee that I've been on now for the past 10 years, we have heard time and time and time again from our public school a lot of issues. And we are now addressing a lot of those issues in this bill. We want our public schools to be stronger and better. And so we're not taking any money away. We are continuing to add money. And so all the things that has been pointed out, I think is doing that. And I will defer to Chairman Sapicki.
Chairman Spicky, succinct, please.
I'll try. We have close to 1 million students in public school right now. Since I've been up here for 6 years, and some of you a lot longer than that, but in the last 6 years, we've made unprecedented investments in public education to the tune, I think, in 6 years of over $2 billion. Pretty close to that, about $2 billion. And so we're investing more money, but in the bill, what you're seeing here is where the rubbers meet in the road, is talking to the professionals and saying, okay, we keep investing more money, but we're stagnant on our scores. What do you need? And they said, you got to free us up. What do you mean? Define that to me. We test too much. We're addressing that in the bill. You evaluate me too much. We're fixing that in the bill. You're requiring me to do all these things. That's taking away from my time to teach the kids, because what teachers have told us across the state, you want better results in education and public education, you got to give us more time to teach the kids. We're addressing that, Chairman Kumar. We're giving the teachers more time to do what they've gone to school, of what they want to do, and that what they want to get these kids across the finish line so that they can have opportunities like we all have. Just let us spend more time educating them, teaching them in the classroom, and we'll get you better results. And by the way, we're investing another $260 million this year in public education.
Chairman Kumar, before I recognize you, sir, Vice Chair Reedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I make a motion to go out of session at this time to hear from the opponents and proponents of this piece of legislation.
We have a motion and a second. Without objection, we are out of session. I have two speakers, one pro and one con here. I have Ms. Candace Ashburn. Would you come forward, please? And I have Mr. Walter Blanks. Ms. Ashburn will be speaking in opposition. Mr. Blanks will be speaking in support. Ms. Ashburn, make sure you have a red light in your mic. Introduce yourself to us and begin your remarks. You have 3 minutes. No, your mic's not on. Make sure you have a red light.
Thank you. Is that good?
Yes, introduce yourself, please.
Thank you. My name is Candace Ashburn. I'm a resident of Williamson County. I'm a mother of 3, a mental health professional, and I have a child with Down syndrome. He's had an IEP since he was 3 years old in early intervention services in Williamson County. He's also been educated in a Nashville traditional private school until he wasn't. He's also been homeschooled, and in middle school, I placed him back in the public system because that was the only choice that provided him an appropriate education. I will note on the withdrawal of my child in private education, because of lack of services, I forfeited $20,000 in the process. So it is not as simple as it has been alluded to simply take our children out of a private school without a lot of mental, emotional, and financial distress. I informally tested the theory of choice among current ESA schools. I scoured all of the websites and found either, 1, they overtly espouse on their websites that they do not provide services for students with learning disabilities, exceptional needs, or IEPs. Or 2, I emailed them to find out, and to my personal inquiry of available services, these were some of their responses. School number 1, we do not have any individual separate exceptional education classes available. School number 2, we only service mild learning needs. School number 3, we don't accept students who have low cognition or Down syndrome because we don't have the resources to serve them. School number 4, we do not have aids or resource classes. School number 5, we don't have the level of service that can be provided. School number 6, we're not able to offer services that most IEPs call for. School number 7, we are not equipped to service students with disabilities. School number 8, no, we don't, but I highly recommend XYZ. Number 9, we don't have the resources for your child. I am so sorry. Number 10 and 11 and 12 and so on. Beyond my personal experience and research, I did find, which I think it would be, would encourage you to take a look at, a policy paper that was done out of the National Council on Disability. These were some of their findings. Number 1, rights under the IDEA generally do not extend to participants in voucher programs. Number 2, studies of school choice and voucher options have shown mixed results, and special education has usually been ignored. Number 3, vouchers usually only cover a portion of the tuition. Number 4, principles of school choice and voucher programs may not be consistent with IDEA principles, such as accountability for results. Number 5, type of structure, policies, and procedures of voucher programs profoundly affect students' rights. And number 6, choice provisions offered to general education students must also extend to special education students.
Ms.
Let me say that
Ashburn, your
again.
time has expired. Please finish up.
Let me just repeat that last finding, please. Number 6, choice provisions offered general education students must also be extended to special education students. In closing, it concluded that you, the legislators, have a major challenge to ensure that any development of school vouchers is based on the direct input of parents, positive results for students with disabilities, sound empirical research of its effectiveness as a policy option, and is in accordance with applicable federal and state law and civil.
Your time has expired, ma'am. We will hear now in support from Mr. Walter Blanks, you have 3 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Walter Blanks Jr., and I'm here to express my strong support for this bill. And I sit before you as someone who has personally experienced and lived the school choice story. Grew up in Columbus, Ohio, where I was surrounded by poverty, crime, and low expectations. I watched my family struggle to put my siblings and I in schools that worked for us. I'm number 2 of 6 children, and so when we talk about this issue of educating children, no one system can fit every single child. You even go on a smaller level into one household. And so, because of the Ed Choice Scholarship Program in Ohio, I was able to attend a school that was a good fit for me. The school that I was leaving, one of the main reasons that I left was because I was being severely bullied. And the principal told my mother that if you just give us 5 years, we'll have the middle school turned around and the high school turned around. And my mom said, in 5 years, Walter will either be in jail or in a body bag. And we don't have time for either of those things. And so because of that, I was able to leave that environment. And I found myself in a small private school where my academics not only significantly increased, but I began to thrive and enjoy my educational journey. I was exposed to a lot of things, positive things in that private school, and it changed my life. And I used the program from 6th grade all the way through graduating high school, which statistically was not the expectation in my community, let alone graduating from college as well. And so those who oppose school choice often assume that if we give families the option to do something else or to go to another provider, that they will take it. And I don't believe that the only way to protect the system is to deny families with the option to choose something else. And so we must not only improve the system, but give parents and families options. And despite what others may believe, I'm confident that this committee and this General Assembly can walk and chew gum at the same time and improve the public education system while also giving families options right now. Thank you so much for allowing me to come and share my story and be involved in this conversation.
Thank you very much. Members, we have very limited time. If you have questions of the witness, I'm going to ask you to restrict them to 1 or 2 questions. I see Representative Johnson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So from what you just told us, there are a lot of folks that feel like public dollars should be used for schools that take every child or where every parent has a choice. Do you feel with the voucher system that every parent has a choice?
Are you addressing that to Ms. Ashburn?
Yes.
Ms. Ashburn, you're recognized.
Representative Johnson, the simple answer is just no. No.
Do you have a follow-up?
Yes, sir.
Please.
Yes, I taught special ed for 27 years, and I know for a fact
Thank you.
that my students would not be accepted by any private school with vouchers. The types of students I worked with just absolutely would not be able to get the services they need. And therefore, draining those public dollars away, to me, is a serious problem. And you are required to sign yourself,
Yes, ma'am.
your child, out of their special ed rights.
Please
if
get to
they
your
go-
question.
This is my question. Are you required to sign your child out of those IDEA protections if they were to be accepted in a private school?
Ms. Ashburn, you're recognized.
That's a question I would put back to the committee or to the author of the bill. Currently in ESA and in the other program where parents do have an opportunity to take funds and place their children elsewhere, we do have to waive our rights. That's on the TDOE website. In the handbooks, you waive your rights. And though it is said that we may have a service plan, it is in no way the same as an IEP. You do waive your rights to the IDEA.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have questions of Mr. Blanks? Seeing none. I'm sorry. Chairman Clemens, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and this is for you, ma'am. You listed off those 10, 12 schools, private schools, to whom you reached out. How long had those schools been in existence? I mean, did those schools just form in the last 2, 3, 4 years, or are those established private schools? I'm just curious.
Those were
Ms. Ashburn,
all-
you're recognized.
Sorry, those were all current ESA schools. across the state, west, east, and middle, that I surveyed as many as I possibly could.
But that, were they schools that had just formed in the last few years, or were they, to the best of your knowledge, established private schools, so to speak?
You're
I
recognized.
I can't speak, but like factually, I don't know. I don't know what the program requires. Does the current program require that they be established or not? I do not know. I know based on my own personal experience, many of these schools that are established in Middle Tennessee, when I began the search for my child in private education, I mean, even established schools, whether they're established or not, the bottom line is that they don't admit students with special needs. And if they do, in nature, even a school like FRA or Curry Ingram, they are discriminatory simply based on their diagnosis. So even when they do accept students, they are discriminatory.
Leader Lamb, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Walter, just a statement. Thank you, my friend, for your testimony today and in other committees. You're talking evidence and proof of what
Parliamentary
school choice can do. And I appreciate your
Just a
testimony
second,
today. And when I finish my statement, we can get to whatever order of business is necessary, but I'm addressing the witness. Thank you for your testimony. You have been scorched online and in other venues for your testimony, and it's been questioned. I appreciate it as the journey that you have personally taken, and I can't wait to see what you accomplish next. So just wanted to say thank you for your testimony today.
Representative Jones, you have a question?
Again, we're supposed to ask questions. This is not American Idol where we tell people our personal feelings about where we want to see them go in their
Do you
lives.
have a,
Even
do you
though
have a
we
point of
support
order, sir?
We support.
We are out of session. Do you have a point of order?
My parliamentary inquiry was there a question, as is the standard of this committee, to ask questions and not to give American Idol judge statements commending people.
Your point is noted. Thank you. Do I hear a motion to go back into session? We are back in session.
We had questions. We were on the list for questions. We were on the list for questions.
Hang on just a second here.
You told us when we would come back after the witnesses, we can ask our questions. Let's have some honor, Mr. Chairman. And he was not recognized.
Representative Jones, you will respect the committee. Is that clear?
Will the committee respect its members? Is that
Sir, you will respect the committee. Do you want me to gavel you out of order? To the maker of the motion, can I ask you to withdraw for 2 questions? The question has been called. The parliamentary situation is a motion has been made. We have a proper second. So we have objections. We are voting on going to the question of the bill. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay.
No.
Okay.
This is.
You have a point of order, sir?
Yeah, point of order, Mr. Chairman. Look, this is hands down the most important bill that's going to come before this body this year. It's one of the most expensive budget items in our budget. It is disrespectful, not to only us, but to the entire process, not to allow us to ask questions within the jurisdiction of this body.
What is your point of order, sir?
My point of order is, what type of show is this? Why can't we ask questions that we have?
Sir, you have a point of order, so please state it succinctly.
My point of order is, I would like to ask for courtesy from my colleagues and allow us to ask questions about something about which we care deeply, just as they do.
Okay, we are on a motion.
Point of order.
We are on a motion.
Point of
Point of
order.
order related to the motion.
Yes.
All right.
This motion was called when you had promised, gave your word, you were coming back to me, had even
Exactly.
called my name, but let another member go. Shouldn't we honor the chairman's word?
Exactly. Exactly.
The parliamentary situation is such that the point of order was called.
I have a parliamentary
Thank you, Mr.
inquiry.
Chairman. My question is this: we took a vote, but the vote was not announced. Did we pass that we were moving on with the question, or did that fail? I'd like to know the answer so that we can proceed procedurally. We did vote. We voted. I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Are there any other points of order that take precedence? So you're recognized, sir, for continuation.
Yes, we did vote on whether we were calling the question or not. You asked for those that were in favor of it to say aye.
The chair has
Those
not,
that were
the
against
the
it
chair
say
has
no,
not,
and it never was
the
answered.
chair has not ruled.
Thank you.
The point of order was called on the vote. Representative Jones, what is your point of order, sir?
My point of order is that in this committee, before we can speak, we have to be recognized by the chair. Representative Faison just shouted out, called the question. He was not recognized first. And usually we have to be recognized first before we can just shout out motions. And so I asked that the chairman backtrack because he was not recognized. He just shouted that out without your recognition. And so because we have shown respect to be recognized, I hope that that same standard applies to both sides of the aisle. He was not recognized when he shouted a point of order. You had not said Representative Faison or you're recognized. And so he just shouted that out. That's not how this committee works or has worked since I've been on this committee. And so I hope that we can continue with the process and standards that we've been following to keep decorum in this body.
Your point of order is recognized, sir. However, the vote was taken. Is there objection to the vote? I
Yes.
see three hands. We're going to do a roll call vote.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. I want to finish because you said that you recognize the point of order, which means that cancels out that whole situation that has happened. He was
No,
not
sir, it does
recognized by the
not.
chairman.
It does not. The vote was taken.
Was
The
he
gavel
recognized?
was struck down before you brought it up,
Was
sir.
he recognized by you? That's my
The
only
gavel
clarity.
was struck down before you brought it up.
Was he recognized by the chair to speak?
The gavel was struck down, sir. We are now on a roll call vote to call the question. Madam Clerk, call roll.
Representative Bolso? Representative Bolso votes no. Representative
Hang on
Carr?
just a second here. The chair made an error here in not explaining what we're calling on. The question was called, the roll call vote, yes, if you're supporting calling the question, no, if you're not. Do you wish to change your vote, Chairman Bolso? No? All right, continue the roll call.
Representative Carr? Representative Carr votes no. Representative Chisholm? Chisholm votes no. Representative Clemens?
No.
Clemens votes no. Representative Crawford? Crawford votes aye. Representative Eldridge? Eldridge votes no. Representative Faison? Representative Faison votes aye. Representative Hakeem? Hakeem votes no. Representative Himmer? Himmer votes no. Representative Johnson? Johnson votes no. Representative Jones?
No.
Jones votes no. Representative Kiesling? Representative Kumar? Kumar votes aye. Representative Lafferty? Lafferty votes aye. Representative Lamberth?
Aye.
Representative Lamberth votes aye. Representative Littleton? Littleton votes aye. Representative Martin? Martin votes aye. Representative McCalman? McCalman votes aye. Representative Rudder? Rudder votes aye. Vice Chairman Reedy? Reedy votes aye. Chairman Reagan?
Pass.
Chairman Reagan, present not voting.
We're waiting on the clerk's announcement.
Mr. Chairman, you have 10 ayes, 9 noes, and 1 present not voting.
Previous question fails. We are back on the bill. And before I recognize anyone, I'll ask the sponsors to come forward. Okay, they're here. All right, we will continue on our list. Representative Johnson, you're next on the list.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So one of the things I did want to talk about after that last discussion about the types of tests where these private schools are giving norm reference tests and our public schools are giving criterion reference tests, they both give data that is valuable. However, the one thing that can never happen is those two can never be compared to each other. So we will never know how these schools are doing comparatively because you absolutely, it's junk science if you were to try to compare those two types of tests because they give you two totally different outcomes. And I think that's important for the people to know they're totally different tests.
Is your question addressed to Representative Hastings?
It's actually, well, they'll decide who's going to take it. So the situation is what I heard you say, Representative Haston, I guess I could ask you that question, that our tax dollars should go to educate our kids. Is that correct?
You recognize, sir?
I just, when we were having the discussion with Representative Akeem, I just said that it's a very fair argument to say, one side says that it's, public money that shouldn't go to private. And then another way of looking at it is it's private citizen tax money being decided how to be used to educate their child by that private citizen.
I guess my concern is that in our
excuse me, wait for recognition, please.
Oh, yes, sir.
You're recognized for one follow-up.
So I guess my concern is that with that, public schools take every single child. Private schools pick and choose. And even with those odds, there's not a single state in the country, not one state that has voucher students performing better than their public school peers. Not one state. We've never seen it. And that is concerning to me when we're talking about our what about the folks who don't have kids? What are we doing for them? We take the average, every household has 2 kids and give them $14,000 worth of checks for their taxes because they're not educating a kid? Well, that's silly because the idea of those public schools is funding those public schools so that your property values
Representative
stay
Johnson,
high.
please get to your question.
I'm getting to my question. You have to explain this. Everyone else gets to explain. I'm not sure why I don't get to explain. But the reality is it's for the public good. It's so that we have educated folks in our communities and our property values stay high. And these are schools that take every single child. We're talking about sending those dollars. Why are we sending dollars? Here's my question. Why are we sending dollars to schools that do none of the things you guys have said for 12 years works? You have said that this testing is critical. Evaluating teachers is critical. So highly qualified teachers is critical, but you're not even going to hire they don't have to hire certified teachers. This testing is so important. All of these things are so critical to a good education, but you're making it is
please get to your question.
impossible. Why are you making it possible for there to be accountability for these schools? There is no way to compare these schools to public schools under your bill.
Chairman White, you're recognized.
Thank you. I will comment on it. Chairman Slater wants to address the.
All right, Chairman Slater, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And though it is true that it would be junk science to try to compare a criterion reference test with a norm reference test, a norm reference test does measure whether there has been growth and whether there's been achievement. And so those scores and those results can be reported back to the department, and the department can determine whether or not students who have received the scholarship and taken those to private schools have had growth or achievement or achievement.
Representative Akeem, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One brief comment and a question. The comment is just listening. To me, it's inferring and it's suggesting that if you have your child in a private school, you have been taken advantage of, that you're giving something extra to public schools. I don't think that takes into consideration a number of those people in public schools, their parents pay rent. That money goes toward taxes, and they have income taxes themselves. So I would hope we would frame this in such a manner where it does not imply or infer that because your child is in public schools, that you're taking advantage of the system from those who are more well-to-do, acknowledging that a lot of that money comes from those who are considered average citizens. Now, my question is, has any entity outside of the legislature or the staff, such as Sycamore, had an opportunity to study or review this plan that is being proposed?
Who wants to field that one? Chairman White, you?
There have been a lot of studies on this and all things. I think too, we may be a little bit off rulemaking now and on the policy, which we can have discussion on the policy of the bill. So we'll leave those discussions for later. Thank you.
Thank you. One quick follow-up. Sir, we are in the rulemaking body here. We're asking questions about rules and you ask about policy. Would you like to refine your question to make it more about rulemaking?
Okay, in order to have rulemaking, there has to be some studies made, and I'm asking you if there's a study that the general public accepts as being legitimate, has reviewed what we're doing, what's been done here.
All right. Again, the bill has 18 sections on it that are related to rulemaking. A public policy study was not one of them. Would you like to refine your question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Next on my list is Chairman Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I, first of all, want to thank my colleagues for allowing us to continue with this discussion. Two questions. Are there any rules or rulemaking processes outlined in this bill requiring a private school to accept a student with a voucher?
You're recognized, sir.
It is my understanding, no.
Follow up, sir.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. My last question is, I keep hearing all this sales pitch with all these positive things that some of which I actually like, some of which we actually agree on. A large part we actually agree on. So my question to the sponsors, and any of you can answer if you want, is why are all these things being held hostage by the voucher program? Why are vouchers in this bill?
Chairman Hastings, you recognize?
Thank you. Appreciate the question. It was mentioned earlier that, we've been up here for 12 years saying that we need to make sure that we have this testing and this and that. Couldn't be directed to me. I've only been up here 6 years. This is my 17th year in the Perry County school system, and my 17 years has been wanting to have less testing and more instruction time. And that's what this bill does. And, to answer your question, I think that, we get caught up a lot of times with being able to, before I get too much of a tangent, just repeat your last part of your question one more time so I don't get too far.
You recognize, sir.
Why are vouchers in this bill?
You recognize, sir.
For my 6 years, up here, for instance, I've been trying to, since my first year up here, been trying to reduce testing without any success. The last 2 or 3 years, a lot of us have worked to try to get the insurance plan increased, not only from 45, but to 80%. A lot of these things we've been trying to get across the line for years without any movement. And more than anybody in this room that a lot of times it's timing, and it's a matter of when's a good time. And the Education Freedom Scholarship Act fit in perfectly with a lot of the education freedoms that we wanted to see in public education. So it seemed like a great time to take a tandem approach of having Education Freedom Scholarships and Education Freedom Act for public schools at the same time, where that we can have the best of both worlds here going forward from both sides. And that's something that a lot of times doesn't happen up here. I realize it's a different approach that, it's kind of two polar opposite things on the paradigm, but we're working at the same time for a common good to just improve education in a whole in Tennessee.
Representative Clemens, last follow-up, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman Reagan. I guess my concern there is I would love to see the vouchers taken out, and I'd work arm in arm with you as we have for several years on this piece of legislation. And, and it's telling that we had to dress this bill up in so many ways to pass the voucher plan, because you talked about all the things you heard from teachers and you've heard from your colleagues, but you didn't say any of them asked you for vouchers. They want all this other stuff. And so, I mean, let's step back here off the ledge. You say 20% of this bill is vouchers, 80% of it's the rest. That 20% is going to kill the public schools, so none of that other stuff's going to make a difference.
Your
That's
question,
the
sir.
problem
Your
we're
question,
looking
sir.
at here.
Your question?
My question is, again, I haven't heard an explanation why vouchers are in this bill. We could run this and pass it through the House separately. So my final question is, if any of this stuff that you're bragging about and that you're talking about that is so great gets taken out of the bill in the conference committee, are you going to vote for the bill still?
You're recognized.
I wouldn't.
Members, I have 4 remaining on my list. I'm going to go to the one person who has not been recognized for a question yet before I come back for the follow-ups. Representative Bolso, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move previous question.
We have a motion. We have a second. We have a motion and a second. We have an objection. All in favor of the question indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Ayes have it. We are now voting on the bill before us for a positive recommendation. The previous motion was made. This will be going out to Finance, Ways and Means with a positive recommendation if it passes. All members in favor of sending this to Finance, Ways and Means indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay.
No.
Ayes have it. Ballot moves out to Finance, Ways and Means. If you wish to be recorded as a no, please indicate so to the clerk. What? We're not done yet. Take this bill up anyway. We are moving to bill number 10 on your list. I think that's right.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 1739. Mr. Chairman, if I can rule with the gavel at this time.
Mr. Vice Chair, you have the gavel.
This bill number 10 on the calendar is Chairman Reagan's bill. Can I get a motion? And got a motion and a second to hear the bill. I do see that we have an untimely amendment. If there's no objection, we'll take that up. And it's Representative Hemmer. That is your amendment. I need a motion and a second to hear the amendment. We've got a motion and a second. Representative Hemmer, please explain your amendment, and then we'll get Chairman Reagan to explain the bill in totality after we take the vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for actually had a timely filed amendment, but it had a small issue that legal pointed out. So this untimely filed amendment, drafting code 016276. This amendment vacates 3 members of the TSU board and extends the board existence to June 30th, 2026. There have been many conversations about finding a compromise, what was passed in the Senate in their version that vacates 10 members. So this was a good compromise. And if you would, Mr. Chair, I think Representative Love may be here to.
Any objection to putting the amendment on the bill at this time? Seeing none. All in favor of putting House Amendment 16276 on House Bill 1735 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition, nay? The amendment goes on. At this time, we will go out of session to hear from Representative Love on the bill as amended. Representative Love, please introduce yourself to the committee.
Thank you, sir. Harold Love Jr., State Representative, House District 58. Chairman and members of the committee, House Government Operations Committee, it was my hope that this bill would help fix a lot of what we're talking about in what Representative Hamer mentioned earlier. The Senate, of course, passed a piece of legislation that vacated 10 members of the board. This amendment, as I understand it, would vacate only 3 members that have been appointed by the governor, whose term ends June 30th, 2024. This amendment also extends, as I understand, the term of the board to June 30th, 2026. And this helps resolve the wind down portion. As I understand it, the board is in wind down right now. So it helps stop that process and extend the board into 2026. That's it, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Love. Questions or comments to Representative Love on the bill as amended? Seeing none, Representative Love, thank you for that. We do have a couple folks here that would like to speak on the bill. If they would come forward, Van Pinnock and Sean Wimberly. You got your timer. We put it on.
Mr. Chairman, I'm
Yes, sir.
Van Pinnock. I am a 2020 appointee to the TSU board by Governor Lee, and I also chair our housing committee. Let me thank you for the time that you're allowing us. Thank you to the committee members. I'll be very brief in my comments. Mr. Chairman, I was in your office in the spring of last year, and we had a somewhat robust discussion about variation, to get a little wonky, variation in the policies and procedures of organizations and how too much variation would lead to disruption. So I am here in support of 1739 and a continuation of the board so that it is not disruptive to both our decision-making and the issues that we have in front of us, and it is not disruptive to our students and our faculty. As you know, many of you know, we're in the middle of a presidential search. We need to get that completed. There are several other items that the university is dealing with right now and with respect to audits and other things that are coming on the board purview. We need to get those completed. So we are here to say that we are in support of the continuity of leadership, which we think is very important.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Wimberly?
Yes, thank you, Chair Reagan and committee's members. I am Sean Wimberly Jr. I serve as a student trustee for the board of trustees here at Tennessee State University. And I wanted to keep my comments brief as well. And I think that one thing that has been missing at the table when it comes to these bills is the student's point of view and the student's concern. I serve as the essence of the student body, speaking for over 7,000 students. And our biggest concern or issue is that we do not want to see continuing disruptions at our university. Right now, we are in search of a new president and talks of removing this institutional knowledge. Our board of trustees how does that truly serve the students? And there's been several talks about how the main concern in terms of legislators is the future of TSU. I think that as we move forward with this particular bill, we keep that in mind. The least disruption to our executive leadership is what the students are vouching for. And so I would point that there. I would like to also add that when we think about removing some of these board members, removing our board of trustees, what that does to an institution that's already been in the spotlight for several issues. And we're talking about branding, we're talking about future recruitment, we're talking about issues that we cannot foresee how impactful they can be or harmful they can be to this university. And so I'll end with that.
Yep. Thank you, sir. Thank you, both of you gentlemen, for being here with us. Representative Johnson, questions for either one of these gentlemen?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate you being here. Do you all currently have a student voice and a faculty voice on the board? And is that going to change?
Yeah, so I am the student voice. We have a faculty trustee as well as Dr. Bill Johnson. When you ask, is that going to change? Do you mean as in?
With the legislation?
So with the original bill to remove the 10 members, yes, that's all 10 board members. So there will be no faculty or student trustee from my understanding.
Okay, that seems
Representative Johnson.
seems like not a great idea to
And,
me.
and if I,
Go ahead.
I say, if I can add, I think a lot of the conversations has been about trying to improve the practices and systems when it comes to Tennessee State University. And when it comes to the original bill, I think it is a bit extreme. There's a saying I grew up with. I played quarterback, and I was taught to throw the ball within an 18-inch window from shoulder to shoulder. But being a black quarterback, I was taught that you want to throw it within a 9-inch window because you can't afford to miss in this small shoulder range. I think that when it comes to our board, we have been rated as a good board. There have been things that we have made mistakes on, but this 10 members, it goes to show why that saying I mentioned earlier is so important to me, because even with us making minor mistakes, we're getting that extreme and harsh punishment.
And
follow up, Representative Johnson.
yes, I just want to say that I've had the pleasure of coming over to TSU in the last year or so multiple times and was just so impressed with everything from sitting down and talking with the president to attending graduation. And I'm just so impressed with what I see happening there. And I don't understand at all the need for this change when it seems to be things are moving in such a positive direction currently. Thank you.
Thank you. Any Thank you. Any further questions for either of these gentlemen? Seeing none, once again, thank you for being with us today. We'll go back into session.
Thank you.
Representative Akeem, did you have a question on the bill? And is that directed at the sponsor of the amendment or to Chairman Reagan?
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to first commend Dr. Glover and the board that has worked in some very difficult circumstances over the years. And I would hope that the efforts of this body would signify that indeed we have interest and concern in Tennessee State moving forward, not backwards. And at the appropriate time, Mr. Chairman, I will make a motion on a direction that maybe the body of this legislature will accept and move forward on.
Thank you, Representative Akeem. And if I'm understanding your question, we did take the amendment from Representative Akeem and placed on the bill. So we're on the bill. Representative Akeem or Representative Hemmer, at this time, tell the committee and those watching exactly what we're doing with this piece of legislation at this time. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this amendment would be moving 3 board members whose terms are going to be expiring before June 30th, 2025, and they'll be vacated effective the date of this act. And that'll require the governor to fill these 3 vacancies in addition to 2 current holdover vacancies, which will establish the new TSU board and also effectively extend the board through 2026. Thank you.
And members, that's what we have done, is rewritten the bill to what he just stated. Any further questions on the bill? Chairman Reagan, back to you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And as the bill has been explained, I think there are no other questions. I will defer to Representative Hammer. I'm sorry, to Representative Hakeem.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This bill doesn't have everything in it that I guess I don't want to say either side, but maybe a majority of people want to see, one extreme or the other. So with that, I would move that we accept the recommendation of Representative Hammer and move forward with that. So I so move, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Hakeem. And the bill is in that form, and we're almost ready to take a vote if there's no further questions. So as was stated by Representative Hammer, with the amendment, that is the structure of the bill as it has been already stated. Are we ready to vote on the bill as amended? All in favor of moving out House Bill 1739 as amended to calendar rules signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition, nay. Bill moves out. Chairman Reagan, the gavel is yours, sir.
Thank you. Members, we have exhausted our time in this room here. The chair will entertain a motion to adjourn. So we have a motion to adjourn without objection. Committee is adjourned. All bills will roll to the next calendar.